So good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's event, Out for Faith, hosted by Out for Australia. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are all joining from today. For me, they are the Wurundjeri people. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and the Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us tonight. This event is also being live streamed on the Facebook, so also welcoming everyone who are watching us live on the Facebook. Thank you to all our wonderful panelists joining us today. Ezra, Sheetal, Percy, Musin, Bhante, thanks very much. Now to give you all a bit of an overview about Out for Australia. It's a not-for-profit organization that seeks to mentor and support LGBTQIA+ youth, especially the students and the budding professionals or the aspiring professionals. Our mission is to provide visible role models, mentors, thought leadership, and a targeted support to the youth, students, and professionals from LGBTQIA+ community, whilst also creating and strengthening a sense of community. For more information and to get involved, please visit our website, outforaustralia.org. Now, before we move ahead with the event, I would like to state that I will be using the term queer as an umbrella term to represent the people from LGBTQIA+ community. The opinions discussed tonight are not OFA's opinions. Also, the panelists will be talking about the experiences from their lives and that they don't speak or represent for everyone of that religion or sexuality or gender identity. Some people may have lived similar experiences, but some may have vastly different experiences. We aren't representing every religion or purposely living any religion out tonight. If you don't see yourself represented and would like to be represented in future, please get in contact with us and we would love to talk. We are not an authority, but we want this to be a safe space and protect the panelists and the audience from any content through which can be upsetting, which is why we have disabled the comment or the chat section. Now, that being said, we would also absolutely encourage all of you to ask the questions. And to ask your questions, you would be able to see a barcode, which you'll just have to scan. So once you'll scan the barcode, it will take you through a different link. So that's the barcode which you'll have to scan. It will take you through a link which will enable you to submit your questions. Those questions will come through to us and we'll moderate them and then put forth our panelists. Now, starting with tonight's event, I would also like to say that I also want everyone to know that by the nature of the conversation tonight, we will be discussing the things that deal with experiences of homophobia, transphobia, disownment, and other forms of discrimination. I'm offering an overall content warning for those themes. Now, if the panelists are going to talk about specific experiences pertaining to those themes, they will also give a specific warning then so that you can disengage if that is something that you would feel safe to do so. Now, starting with tonight's event, why Out for Faith and what is the reason and what is the backstory behind having this event live tonight? So a few months ago, I was just ruminating a phase from my early 20s when I had set myself day aside to do Hanuman Chalisa 100 times a day, standing on one feet and in a yogic pose. Now, that Hanuman Chalisa is considered to be a series of verses from Hindu faith, which is considered to be very miraculous. Being a staunch Hindu then, I believed that I would wake up feeling very normal about my sexuality experiences, or that I would be able to overcome the feeling of guilt that I was experiencing because of my sexuality fluidity. Now, when I joined OFA, I had such similar discussions with my peers. Now, again, the next day, to my utter disappointment, even after completing the Hanuman Chalisa, I did not wake up. I still woke up having the same fantasies, and there was still a sense of guilt. But here I am today, learning to accept and embrace that feelings that I'm experiencing about my sexuality are absolutely normal. When I joined OFA, I had these discussions with with my peers, which led me to dig much more deeper into this. And we just conducted some research, a 2014 survey conducted by the Western Sydney University and the Young and Well Cooperative Research Center uh, found out that 50% of the religious LGBTQIA plus youth experienced a conflict between their sexuality or the gender identity and between their faiths. Since I resonated very strongly with that, and as I took over the role of National Events Coordinator a few months back in the month of May this year at Outflow Australia, I decided to take a lead on this event. And here I am, which is why I strongly very much resonate with this event. Now, beginning with the introduction of our panelists today, Bhante Akaliko, his pronouns are he, him. He is an out and proud queer monk in the Theravada forest tradition and the founder of Rain Bodhi, LGBTQIA plus Buddhist community. He is a Buddhist chaplain at Western Sydney University and on the board of directors of the Buddhist Council of New South Wales. Bhante currently resides at the monastery at the end of the world in Sydney. Ezra Dixon, pronouns she, they, is a disabled, neurodiverse, non-binary, queer Jewish Kiwi with a background in LGBTQIA plus volunteering, communications, and public services. They are also a self-described nerd, unabashed people person, and obsessive dog parent. Having first fallen into LGBTQIA plus volunteering by accident, Ezra has spent most of their professional career moonlighting as an advocate for intersectional queer equality and inclusion before making a leap to a full-time career. She is particularly passionate about working with the allies and the broader community to raise awareness, build bridges, and about bringing the change in the lives of LGBTQIA plus young people across Australia. Mohsin Hendricks, pronouns are he and him. He is an Islamic scholar with a background in classical Arabic Islamic sciences obtained from Karachi in Pakistan. He is an imam, which is an Urdu word for religious leader, by profession and also a human rights activist, focusing on sexual orientation, gender identity within Islam. He has done his independent research on Islam and sexual diversity. He has also designed and facilitated many workshops and trainings on Islam, sexual orientation, and gender diversity. Mohsin also holds a diploma in counseling and communication obtained through the South African College of Applied Psychology. Mohsin is the first openly queer imam in the world. Percy Gutler, pronouns are they and them. They are a settler, academic, and an advocate living in Melbourne. They are a scholar of queer religious studies and currently undertaking their PhD conversion practices at the Australian Research Centre into Sex, Health and Society at the La Trobe University. They are steering committee member of the Brave Network, which is a support and advocacy organization for survivors of the conversion practices. And they were also involved in advocating the banning of conversion practices in Victoria. In their spare time, Percy loves watching Twilight and preparing for the arrival of their new pet, tree frog. Sheetal Deo. Sheetal, pronouns are she, her, is the creator and the principal solicitor of Shakti Legal Solutions, lead collaborator with the Diversity Collective, and an adjunct lecturer with the College of Law. In addition to volunteering with OFA, Sheetal is the coordinator and the president of Ethnic Plus, a not-for-profit organization supporting diversity within the rainbow community, and a board member of the LGBTI Legal Service. Also, many congratulations, Sheetal, for securing the vote of confidence today as a counselor at the Queensland Law Society. I know it's a very big day for you. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us. Now, starting with our discussion, I would like to ask our panelists to share some of their insights or their stories about their individual journey of coming to terms with themselves. What role has religion played in that? What were the elements of their religion they were able to connect with, and what were the elements which stood out to them, and what were the elements they were not able to connect with.
I might jump in on this one, if that's okay, if you don't mind me putting my hand up.
Thanks,
my relationship with, so I suppose just to begin, things I'll be talking about when I'm giving this answer, my journey as a convert, so converting into a religion, gender dysphoria, low levels of transphobia, but transphobia nonetheless, and non-binary erasure are a few things that I'll be talking about, as well as I would say probably a degree of complex positive heterosexuality. So my journey into Judaism as a convert and in terms of my gender has sort of been in parallel. I came to grips with my mother's ancestral connections with Judaism around five or 6 years ago, and moved to Australia for the express purpose of converting. And during that process, through engaging in Jewish ritual life, I got a few opportunities to actually explore my gender as well. The moment that kind of comes to mind the most is that I was at a progressive Jewish wedding in rural southern Texas. Try and say that 5 times fast, with some very close friends, and having given away my yarmulke, my kippah, the hat that Jewish male men and women and people in general can wear at religious ceremonies or in general, to someone else, I didn't have a head covering. So one of my friends who covered her hair with what's called a tichel or a mishpachat offered to do me up. And I put it on, so noting this is traditionally a feminine form of expression, a religious expression, and gender expression as well, put it on and literally looked in the mirror and went, oh shit. Standing there pre-transition as I was at the time and going, hang on a minute. This feels right in a way that mask presentation has never felt right to me. So I literally discovered my gender through the lens of religion and through the lens of my faith. Since then, it's been a complicated journey. I've found trying to navigate transition and conversion at the same time I'm still converting to Judaism has been really challenging. There's often a cultural preference I find in Jewish spaces that you're Jewish first and other identities come second. And even in progressive spaces, which I inhabit, where queer identity is often really accepted, I've really struggled to be able to share and live my authentic experience as a queer person, as a trans person, as a non-binary person, without being accused of overplaying it or making a big deal out of it or being obsessive about it or deprioritizing my Jewish journey. I've been expressly told on a few occasions, please stop talking about your gender or your sexuality because that's not relevant here. We don't want to hear about that through your conversion. Your conversion should only talk about your Judaism, ignoring the central fact that I can't talk about my faith without talking about my gender or my sexuality because they're such integrated parts of who I am. So it's been a mixed journey. And I've definitely grappled with internalized transphobia as a part of that. I almost put off my transition because of that, the pressure to do so. I'm very glad that I didn't, because I haven't been able to go to synagogue in almost 2 years, but I have been able to continue taking estrogen. Thankfully, I don't need a minion for that. So it's been a journey, to say the least.
That sounds quite vivacious journey as well, I must say, and I'm pretty sure like it could be full of twists and troughs, and it can be like really tough as well. But really proud that you are here today with us, and you really come out so strong to be able to empower people like us and those from our audiences. Would you like to add anything to that, Sheeta?
Yeah, so my background, and thank you for having me on the panel today. So my background, I'm a Hindu, a practicing Hindu. So I have a history of indentured laborers from Fiji, so the people called Girmitia, which comes from the term agreement, and our interpretation of agreement is Girmit. So that's probably 5 generations from India into Fiji. I'm first generation Canadian. Grew up in I wouldn't say the most orthodox Hindu tradition because of our influence from Fiji. So we had mom's side was from the Brahmin side, and dad's side was what's called Arya Samaj. So that was a lot more ceremonial and ritualistic. So I grew up with Tuesdays were for Hanuman, and we sat and we did the Hanuman Chalisa every Tuesday morning. Mondays were for Shivji, and I even did a Sola Samvar Vrat, which is 16 Mondays fast to acquire a good husband, which was probably in vain because in my adulthood I realized that's probably not what I want. So yes, I've had a very close tie to Hinduism, and I think for me, when I was trying to come to terms with questioning my sexuality, I did so after I had moved out of home, and I did so later in life in my 20s or mid to 20s. And I actually held closely to religion during that process because, and there's a phrase that I listen to, and it's in the Hindu Arti, Mata Pita Tum Mere, and it talks about how you're my mother and you're my father, and who else do I look to but to you? So in the moment when I felt like everyone had forsaken me, I turned to Shakti, so the goddess, and I kind of said, you made me this way, man, like you did this to me, you'd get me through it. And that's a common conception in Hinduism as well, that if God has brought you to it, and God will bring you through it. So I think I fully understood the best I could in that moment, detachment and surrender, because I completely just surrendered and said, this is something I have no control over. I've tried very hard to not be this way, and I can't. And I turned to Hinduism in that. And I mean, as we progress the discussion, that also then spun me into looking into Hinduism, because Shakti is half Shiv. So we look at Adarna Shakti, which is half male, half female embodied. So how could it have been that a religion whose primordial being is half man, half woman, can then be so dismissive of people who are gender non-binary? And of course, we have colonialism to attribute that to, and we can look into that a little bit later. But for me, when it comes to my journey in my sexuality, Shiv and Shakti have guided me through it.
I strongly resonate with that, Sheetal, myself, coming from the same faith as well. And I myself did Hanuman Chalisa, like as I've mentioned before, 100 times to turn hetero, which clearly didn't work. But I definitely came to realize that even because, like, as you told about Shiva and Shakti, there have been quite a few references about other deities, like Ayyappa, who is considered to be a form of, or who was born out of Vishnu, Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva. So which also poses a very a big question to all the conventions that we question, and it's coming out of the religion itself. So I strongly resonate with that. Bhante, coming to you, we would love to know about your experiences as well from the same.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Out for Australia for having me, especially here with these fascinating panelists. And I almost wish we had a lot more time to explore some of these things. I'm also, and thank you for pointing this out, Ezra, I'm a convert. And so my experience of coming to my spirituality came after, understanding my own sexuality. And so in some ways, I was very comfortable being out and proud as a queer person, but a little bit shy, a little bit in the closet when it came to my spirituality. Some of this might have had to do with a feeling of anti-religion that I had within myself, and which I think many of my queer community shared, a mistrust of religion, an antipathy towards religion. And so I kind of nursed my spirituality as this kind of secret, almost shameful thing that I didn't really talk about. And it wasn't until I actually ordained as a monk, so entered a monastery, that I really had to come to terms again with my sexuality in a completely new context. I realized that I had led quite a privileged queer existence. Of course, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I experienced and I'll talk here a little bit about homophobia. I experienced homophobia and bullying behaviours and things like that. just as many of my contemporaries did. And so after, getting away from those horrible times at school, my life was pretty good. I just kind of stayed in that inner city queer bubble and surrounded myself with wonderful friends. And it wasn't till I was suddenly forced into a situation where I was very much in a place where people didn't have a lot of literacy around queer issues or interest, in a monastery where these aspects of yourself are really diminished and marginal. And so there was a lot of erasure of my sexuality and my identity as a queer person. And I also saw in various Buddhist spaces some low-level homophobia, explicit transphobia, and of course erasure of non-binary identities. And this really troubled me, actually. I had to really re-examine my faith. And that was a difficult process. So in the end, I also experienced some harassment that was homophobic in nature. And I decided to turn that kind of horrible experience into something that I was going to work with and take power to. And that's why I eventually formed a group called Rainbow, the LGBTQIA+ Buddhist community, where people could feel safe, welcome, loved, and to know that they belong. And that was a few years ago. And I'm really glad that I did that, because it allowed me to give that unjudgmental space for other people to be themselves. And it wasn't until I got to do Rainbow that I realized just how much of myself I had been squishing down, hiding. And it wasn't even something I was doing consciously. It wasn't until I could be in community with my people that I realized that I had, in a way, let my own self down a little bit. And so, as Ezra pointed out, the important thing is we can't separate these aspects of ourself. Our sexuality, our gender, our faith is all interlinked, and we shouldn't try to separate them. And that's why these sorts of events where we're coming together as people of faith who are queer is so important, because it just shows that there's a place for us and that we have a story to tell, and that we matter and that we belong.
Absolutely, Bhante. That's actually a very great initiative to found an organization yourself, so that what you've faced through and ensuring that the other people don't have the similar journey and have that's something which we really resonate as an organization when it comes to being professional, like in a professional space. So thanks for sharing that, Bhante. Really appreciate that. Now, Percy, we would love to hear your views and also your insights from your research.
Yeah. So before I start, I just want to provide a content warning that I'll be briefly talking about conversion practices. And if that's uncomfortable for anyone, then feel free to turn off your sound or anything that you need to do. So I guess for my journey, I knew that I wanted to be a Christian before I was really conscious that I was queer. And a lot of those two identities developed in tandem and were really inseparable. So I was in a quite conservative evangelical community in my late teens when my queerness became a lot more present in my life. And it was in a community that was not accepting of queerness, and there was a lot of conversion ideology in the community, and conversion practices were happening in this community. And so I knew that it just was not a safe space for me to be open about questions I had and doubts that I had about being Christian, and whether that was possible for me while I was coming to terms with my gender and sexuality. And so by that kind of, it culminated in me feeling that it was not possible to be queer and be religious. And so I actually left the community quite abruptly and just decided to be an atheist for around a year. and it just didn't feel right to me. It felt like something was missing. And I ended up getting in touch with someone in the community who had actually also come out. And through that experience, I started exploring a lot of queer affirming theology. And in my studies, I was writing essays about queer identity and religion and kind of all those experiences and reconciling those experiences. And I'd say that my studies really enabled me to reconnect with my religion. I joined an affirming faith community that I still attend now. It's like 3 or 4 years later. And it was being in a space where I could be both Christian and queer that I sort of had a feeling that like I was fully accepted and that all these parts of me could be, I guess, that they were all compatible and that I couldn't really separate either from them. And it was actually in my church community that I was able to explore a lot of my queerness as well. So I'd have a lot of conversations with friends about asexuality and polyamory and how that fit into theology. And one of the first places that I started using my new name when I changed my name was on Zoom Church. So I'd say that like these faith spaces were very important for me also to be queer.
Thanks for sharing that, Percy. I really believe that that's quite a unique journey of yours. Just the reason being, from what the discussions I used to have, like I've known that the more people go towards like academics or like professional studies, the more they become atheists and the more they disconnect with their faith. But in your case, it's quite opposite, and which is like a very quintessential and unique example of how your studies or academic life or journey helped you reconnect with your faith. Whilst you've just shared that, I think it might be worthwhile asking you this question, which we had initially from one of our audience, whilst they registered. They have asked that how they can find a faith community that is LGBTQIA plus affirming. The church websites that they are finding are vague and don't inspire confidence. I would appreciate if you would be able to render some guidance on this question of theirs, please. Are you able to hear me, Percy?
Sorry, I didn't realize you were asking me. That's a really good question. A lot of like when people are looking for faith communities, it can be very hard to kind of find out whether they are welcoming or not. And a lot of churches, in my experience, will say that they're welcoming, and then you'll arrive in the church and actually there's a lot of homophobia present, and people might be excluded from leadership roles or be kind of encouraged to change, even though they've been told that they're loved and welcomed. So that can be really hard to avoid those kinds of places. It can be hard to differentiate. I'd say in my experience, often networking with people that you know is a good way to find places, by like reaching out to people that you know have had good experiences. For example, on Brave Network, we have a Facebook page and a private group in which people are always sharing their experience with churches, and networks like that can be really positive ways to find places that you know will be safe if you've heard from someone else that they've also had a positive experience there.
Sure, thanks for sharing that, Percy. And to all our participants, just to add on what Percy said, whilst I was just planning this this event, I did some research. I came across this organization called Acceptance Sydney, which is particularly for LGBTQIA plus youth, which is a church, and they have their own sessions, which is targeted to the community. So it might be worthwhile to reach out to them, just an FYI. Now coming to Mohsin. We would love to hear from your journey and your journey of being a very first imam from your faith?
Well, thank you for having me, Vandan. I'm really honored to be here. I often get asked this question, when did you first realize that you were gay? And I often say, you know, when did you as a straight person first realize that you were straight? And I think that question kind of hits home. But if I have to put a time frame to it, I suppose probably around the age of 5, when I first experienced marginalization, was because I was a very effeminate boy, and I used to love playing with the things that, you know, being connected with the things that girls are connected to. But then you start receiving that, you know, marginalization from your community, and that's when you start to know that you're different, and this is something that your community doesn't appreciate. Right? I grew up in a very ultra-Orthodox Muslim community. My grandfather was the imam of the mosque, and our mosque was just a stone's throw away from our house. And my mother used to teach in the mosque. And she would often tell me how she would carry me in a basket to the mosque, you know, so that she can go and teach. And so I grew up with religion, and I would say that it was my first identity, you know. And then growing up, becoming a teenager, I would often hear my grandfather talking about gay people going to hell, and they will not be shaded under the throne of God's mercy on the day of judgment and so on. And that used to bother me quite a bit, because at that time, I already realized that I am attracted to the same sex. And so that's really when my journey of starting to reconcile with my faith started. And I think my family at the time probably thought that my desire to study religion was to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather, but it was actually just to find out really what does Islam really say about homosexuality. And I think that led me to, in my late teens, to apply for scholarship in Pakistan, where I studied Islam for 4 years. And I suppose that was probably the most difficult period of my life, because I was confronted with an Islam that comes from a very Salafi-oriented space, and very much anti-homosexuality, to the extent that I had to actually leave Islam for a while, because I knew that was always a possibility, that I could leave the faith, but I could never leave my identity as a queer person. And it is actually within that space of leaving Orthodox or organized religion that I found God. I found a personal relationship with God. And I actually got married to a woman also in that period, and I fathered 3 children. And it was all about, you know, let me try this and let me see if the society is right when they say, you know, how would you ever know that you could possibly be straight as well if you don't try, you know? So I tried. And unfortunately, 6 years later, well, deteriorated, and six years down the line, we got divorced. 3 kids later, and then I decided just to retreat completely from society for 3 months. I fasted the whole of the 3 months, and I was like, God, you're gonna have to tell me what I'm supposed to do with my life here now, because I'm quite confused. And I came out as an activist after that period of seclusion, you know. So I started safe spaces, not really knowing what to do, but I knew that part of my calling was to help others who went through similar experiences as mine. And so for the first time at the age of 29, I met with other queer Muslims, and I was quite surprised how they were negotiating this dilemma between faith and sexual orientation. And I noticed abuse of alcohol, abuse of drugs, suicidal ideation, people having completely lost their faith. And that was the moment for me when I decided this is where my work lies, because I had all the knowledge of Islam at that point. And so by then, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but by then I was convinced that, you know, when every surah in the Quran starts with, in the name of God, the indiscriminately compassionate, the infinitely merciful, that is my God, not the God that was being handed down to me through patriarchy and through people like my grandfather, God bless his soul. And so I started to reconnect with an Islam that was more compassion-centered and all-inclusive. And in fact, that is what I teach today about Islam. And maybe later on I can explain, you know, what are the values within Islam that really kept me connected to my faith. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Surely, Mohsen, thanks for sharing that. I'm very sure like a lot of the youth, especially those coming from the very conservative backgrounds and the families who have felt this family and the pressure from the parents to get married out and not having that acceptance from their family, it would be really worthwhile and would be really insightful for them. And now jumping to the next questions that we would have received from some of our attendees. Was there any depiction of the gender or sexuality fluid characters in their mythology books or the mythological characters of the faith? Would you like to answer this question, Percy?
Oh yeah.
Put his,
I think
hand
Bantan
up.
had something to say, but I'd be happy to add something afterwards.
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think my favorite depiction, at least for myself, of gender fluidity is actually Jesus himself. Like, it doesn't seem very obvious because a lot of the kind of like Western depictions of Jesus are very like white and masculine, but actually Jesus in the Bible is often referred to with feminine terminology, which was very unusual for the time. So like as a figure in like the context of like early Christianity or prior to Christianity, Jesus was actually like a very unusual figure and kind of depicted what would have been like quite unusual gender expression for the time. So yeah, I find that like very encouraging.
Sure. Thanks for sharing that, Percy. Sheeta, we'd love to hear you now as well.
I may pass to Bhante because I know he's been waiting and had his hand up, so I'll speak after him.
You know, I just get excited thinking about these things because I think as queer people of faith, we're often scurrying around the edges of our sacred scriptures and texts, looking for evidence, you know, looking to see, were we there? And of course we were there, right? We've always been there, and there's always been genderqueer people, there's always been intersex people, there's always been asexual people, there's always been bi and gay people. So, and actually Buddhist texts, which were oral and predated, I guess, a lot of other religious texts, that we find all sorts of wonderful characters, and they were recorded in minute detail. So we have what I like to think of as the first recorded gay stalker, one person called Vakali, who was obsessed by the Buddha's body and would love to hang out in this kind of slightly creepy fashion, watching the Buddha. And there's also stories of people who changed their gender. And I think this is an interesting story to talk about because it goes to show how much interpretation really matters and how there's just a paucity of stuff for us to look at, so we can kind of grab at things sometimes and we might not necessarily have the right result. The story I just talked about, the gay stalker Vakali, he might have been doing a religious practice where he believed that he could be purified merely by being in the presence of the Buddha. And this other story I mentioned is the story of a monk who changed sex, changed gender, and was found out, and then was asked to go and stay at the, so he was living in a monk's monastery, but then it seemed he turned into a woman, and then he was encouraged to go to the women's monastery. And so this could be seen as a wonderful story of acceptance and an easy way of being genderqueer at the time of the Buddha. But maybe this person was stealth. Maybe they were in that male monastery and got outed and then was forced to return to the gender identity that they didn't agree with. So there's a lot of stories like this, and there's stories of people who are intersex, there's stories of people who were eunuchs, and lots of stories of sex workers and things like that. And it's a fascinating world, the ancient world, and I can't help thinking sometimes when we think about religion, how boring we've allowed it to become, because there's so much of real fascination. And when we look back through the history, we see that the world was far more complex and much more interesting than maybe we gave it credit for. I'm sure other speakers will have good stories to tell as well. And excuse me, I will apologize for mentioning the stalking without a trigger warning. And I did say it in jest, but I understand that it is a very serious topic, and perhaps I shouldn't have been so careless. Please forgive me.
No worries. Thanks very much, Bhante. Yeah, those stories like around the mythology, and I myself get very fascinated by those, and I'm like, keep them coming. I can see Muhsin's hand being raised as well. So would love to hear from you, Muhsin.
Yeah, just briefly, I just wanted to add on to that. We don't specifically have stories within the scripture, but certainly around the time when, Hadith was compiled, and during the time when Sufi Islam sort of emerged in the world. We're looking at characters like Abu Nawas. Abu Nawas was a famous 9th century poet. He also studied Islam extensively, and he actually had a love relationship with the Muhammad al-Amin, who was the son of the very fierce Khalif Harun al-Rashid. And we often see poetry around them, talking about the one who's buggered and the one who gets buggered and so on. And both of them wrote a lot of homoerotic poetry that is still celebrated within Arab culture today. We also then have Rumi and Shams, the famous poet Rumi of the early 13th century, who had a love relationship with Shams. And often the Muslim community become very apologetic about this relationship, saying that, it was an esoteric relationship that you would not understand, the depths of love. But somehow when you read the story, and as a gay person, you think like, no, something's not right here. And then there's the one about Shah Hussain and Madhu. Madhu was a Hindu boy, and Shah Hussain was a Muslim saint. And this beautiful love relationship that happened between the two of them, to the extent that after both of them died, they were buried in the same grave in Lahore. And today still Muslims go and visit their graves, their mazar. And so the story is very much celebrated, and a lot of people know about this love relationship that they had. So just to add a few of those stories, there are many more.
Sure. Thanks for sharing. Yes, Yashita.
There's so many. I could spend the evening just talking about all the myth and Hinduism. Like, forgive me for my indulgence of being and proud of the culture and the religion, and also of appreciating there's a distinguishment between the two. And I say that because I think somewhere along the way, the culture has, I want to say, polluted what the religion intention may have been. And I say that only by virtue of, in my journey of trying to figure my sexuality out and seeking salvage in Shakti and Shiv, I did a bit of research and looking into Hinduism. And even as a child, I always questioned the practices. If you couldn't tell me why we were doing something, I wouldn't do it. So if there was a particular practice we did because Aji did it, or Nani did it, or mom and dad did it, that wasn't good enough. I needed to talk to the Pandit or talk to the priest directly and say, so why do we do it this way? Why can't I, as a female, go to my grandma's funeral? And it's just, what I've learned is there are so many stories in the Rig Veda, which is the oldest of texts that we have in Hinduism. There are depictions of gender variance. We have, talking about particular examples, I spoke of Shiv and Shakti. That's the beginning of time for Hinduism. And that was the being. We look at the avatars of Vishnu, and we see Mohini, who was a avatar of Vishnu who appeared as a woman to trick the demons into not having the Amrit, which I suppose English translated is like life-giving, life-extending, immortality powers. There's different variations of the story of Ganesha, where we see Ganesha being born made of clay. More commonly, the story we hear is Ganesha was molded out of clay from Mother Parvati and given life that way. But a less popular version is it was actually Parvati's menstruation blood that was swallowed by another woman, and then that woman birthed Ganesha, and that was an elephant-headed woman or an elephant, I believe, who then birthed Ganesha, because Ganesha is half man, half elephant. We look at the Mahabharata again. So the main text that we have Shikandi, who was a man, but identified as a woman and was a woman in a previous life. So then we have trans depiction, and gender variance, even culturally, it's rife. We have a culture that accepts and has historically accepted hijras and people who are third sex, intersex, and gender diverse. And like I said previously, it was only in 1864 when the British actually came into India, they passed legislation that criminalized their gender, or anyone who did not adopt or did not dress in the way that conformed with their assigned sex. So that was the only time where genitalia dictated your gender. Prior to that, gender in Hinduism in India was very fluid. And there's more stories with respect to sexuality, homoerotism. You can even look to the Kama Sutra. There's depictions of same-sex couples enacting sexual acts. So it's very rife. So anyone who identifies as Hindu and is having a hard time navigating that and feels like they can't navigate that and is getting feedback from their family members that this is not allowed, I would, as safely as possible, challenge that, because I have yet to find any scripture that is condemning it within Hinduism. And that's based on my course. So if there's someone out there who has found it, I'm happy to take a look at it and then disregard it, because there's so much more that shows love and acceptance. And we think of the gods and goddesses very similar to what Musin said. It's about compassion. Shiva is all forgiving, will forgive all of the things. So even if I have done something wrong by falling in love with the wrong person, I still feel like I am blessed and still loved by Shiv, Shakti, and all of the beings, as are you.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sheetal, I think, and that's also the message that resonates with what Bible said and what I've heard from my friends, that actually Jesus never hated anyone. He was forgiving and accepting of everyone as their child. He was forgiving even of the criminals, or just forgiving it in general. So yeah, and even when it comes to even marriages, they say that the marriage is actually union of soul, or the marriage of souls, and souls don't have gender. So I think that's something that's very strongly resonates when it comes to Hinduism as well. We've got a couple of questions through the Mentimeter. I'll just open that. So the very first question is, I am interested in that many have converted during their process of sexual or gender identity. Also, their experience of discrimination of religious beliefs still. How do you deconstruct from harmful views? I think given your background, Percy, you might want to answer this question. You might be very well suited to respond to this question when it comes to conversion.
Yeah, I guess in terms of my research, people who have been through quite traumatic experiences, like conversion practices, especially when it comes to like spiritual trauma, it's very difficult to reconcile those like two identities that have been like very conflicted. But actually, for a lot of survivors of conversion practices, spirituality is actually a very important part of that healing process. And whether that's in a formal religious setting or whether it's kind of in a more safer space where there's no kind of external kind of, I guess, consequences, like maybe just exploring a spiritual practice or just the idea of spirituality separate to religion. It's like spirituality divorced from religion can be a very, very healing thing for people. And I think for myself, at least, my spirituality and my faith was a way of kind of coming to accept myself fully and kind of let go of a lot of shame that had become attached to my queerness through being in a quite conservative and unsafe space.
Sure. Yeah, that surely is very insightful, Percy, like separating religion from spirituality, because spirituality, I would say religion is what I've also learned is they say that religion is a subset of spirituality. So yeah, that surely can be really helpful. I hope whoever has raised this question, it answers them and helps them with the response. Mohsin, are you wanting to add something to that?
Yeah, I just think that, and I'm speaking from an Islamic perspective, from a Muslim community perspective, that there are these days, at least within the last 2 decades, there has been a lot of research done on Islam, sexual orientation, and gender identity by progressive Muslim scholars and academics. And I think it's important for people to get in touch with this newfound research, and then sort of compare it with, the dogma and the negative messaging that comes from society. And my work pretty much is around making that information accessible to people.
Sure. Thanks for answering and adding to that, Mohsin. Really appreciate those inputs there. We've got another question from the attendees as well. How do you manage religion, family, and queerness? Ezra, would you like to answer to this question and share some of your insights from your journey?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just a bit multitasking there, checking Facebook comments. Can you repeat the question? Doing 2 jobs tonight.
Yeah, surely. So the question is, how do you manage religion, family, and queerness?
This is, it's a really interesting space for me, this one. Just again, speaking from my personal experience, which includes conversion, as in conversion into a religion, not conversion practices, homophobia, transphobia, non-binary erasure, cis-normativity, and all that kind of stuff as well. My journey's been a really interesting one because I was, even though, as I mentioned, my mother's side of the family is historically Jewish, and I have, I grew up with Jewish cousins. My family that I was raised with, the nuclear family, if you will, was Christian. My dad was Irish Catholic, and my mum was actually raised Presbyterian. And they met and they settled on the middle, which was Church of England, because I grew up in the UK originally. And juggling that journey, my mum was obviously really, really thrilled when I started going to synagogue. I left high school, came out as gay, rejected religion, having been to boarding schools and church schools all my life, and became very vehemently anti-religion, and particularly anti-Christianity at that point in my life with the experiences I'd had, I'm afraid to say. And that was really difficult for my mother, who, for her faith was at the core of how she understood and dealt with the world, when it came to, and trigger warning here for mental health issues, when it came to me navigating diagnoses of depression and anxiety and dealing with some traumas that had arisen in my life, my mother's first response was the faith approach, was to engage with God, which at the time I was very much not receptive to. But I was very lucky in terms of my conversion to Judaism to have my mother be very, very supportive. We used to joke that every holidays when I came home from boarding school, they'd pack me off to my Jewish relatives at the other end of the country in New Zealand. And so I actually did more in the way of Pesach and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as a teenager than I did Christmas and Easter, because I didn't want to get out of bed to go to church, but I had to go to synagogue. Small wonder where I ended up. That was sort of fait accompli, I think, for my mother. But for my dad, who I should mention, both of my parents are in their 70s. I was an only child born to older parents. They both struggled with me coming out as queer. Dad really struggled with me coming out as trans, and still to this day doesn't get it. I haven't been home in 2 years for obvious reasons, and I joke that I'm going to step off the plane and give my father the shock of his life, dressed to the nines, because he hasn't seen me since before I started my transition. He's going to be blown away, and reality will come rushing up to meet him. But my father, being in his late 70s, is a very conservative cisgender white man, of the quite fond of Margaret Thatcher cut, I'm afraid to say, and doesn't really get all of this, either the queer stuff or the faith stuff. My father liked to joke whenever I would come home to visit, because I was trying to keep kosher. He was convinced there was a loophole that, hospitality, whatever someone puts in front of you, you have to eat it. So he was, I'm going to make you a bacon and prawn penne carbonara every night when you come home. Not realizing that I actually didn't want to get out of jail free card on not having to eat bacon. I was quite happy not eating bacon. It's good for my arteries, and I'm not that fussed anyway. But also it's important to me. So there was that sort of underlying ignorance about it. And I think a sort of underlying level of confusion about how I could be so fascinated and interested in my faith journey while also continuing to do these non-normative things. I think my dad kind of expected that one of these days I'd snap out of it, keep going to synagogue, but go to synagogue in a suit and grow my beard and, find a nice Jewish girl and all that kind of stuff. And here I am, 5 years later in a dress, going to synagogue with a non-Jewish partner. And it's very confusing for him. But I definitely acknowledge that intersection for family and religion and faith can be really, really challenging, particularly people who grew up in faith-based households. I wish I had words of wisdom to offer. I don't, apart from humorous anecdotes. But the one thing I will say, the one thing that's really stood out for me in my journey is that my faith, while obviously I appreciate the faith my parents have and how that's guided them, and I think on the whole helped them be good people, my faith isn't shaped by or determined by their faith. I found my own way in my faith and in my identity. And the best thing I ever did was sorry, Mum, get on the plane, go to a different country and figure out who I was for myself. And I acknowledge that I've been hugely privileged in being able to do that.
I absolutely echo that. A similar journey for me in that respect. I only started to unpack questions around sexuality, religious identity when I moved away from home, because it's quite hard to do when you're in that space, going to kirtans every Thursday and Sunday and being asked to sing bhajans and all the things. So it's very, very hard to remove yourself from that. I did want to make a point with respect to approaching I think there was a question you had said about someone who has comments about not accepting the religion, and backpacking off of what Ezra just said, religion is quite personal. So it's your relationship with the higher power, and no one gets to dictate that but for you. And I think this is kind of where I won't say I left religion. I think I just kind of took a bit of a breather, only to kind of understand my way back to it. And it wasn't religion I had the issue with, and it wasn't Hinduism I had the issue with. It was organized religion I had the issue with, because organized religion can be a means of control. So in those circumstances, I would say, again, if you're in a safe enough space to challenge those understandings, because I've had people say, well, what about like what will happen with you in the next life, and so on. That's between me and big guns upstairs. And I'm happy with that. I have regular dialogue with all of them on a regular basis. So if it is the case that I've done something wrong, when kingdom come, I will have to cross that bridge. But that's for me to that's for me and my God, the higher being, to come to terms with. It's not my mom's responsibility. It's not my dad's responsibility, though they may feel they've done something wrong in their upbringing, or not raising me as a good Hindu girl. But it has nothing to do with them. So I think the more that we can focus on the fact that religion is so personal. It's your connection to a divine being, or the divine being in the higher power. No one gets to dictate that. No one knows what's in your heart, but for the higher being above. And if it's pure, that's all you need, right? So I think for me, that's the central thing that I come back to, is anytime I hear the chatter, and boy, the chatter can get loud sometimes. I don't, and this is why I practice my religion in my safe space. So I'm hesitant to go to temples, because I'm mindful of what I feel is a lack of distinction between society and culture's beliefs and what the religious beliefs are. I don't need someone to tell me how to pray. I know how to do that. I've been doing it since I can remember, and it's been working because I can hear and I can communicate, and there's open dialogue. So I don't necessarily need to go to that organized infrastructure to do that. So it's that distinguish between culture and society's views and religion. And I hold on to that for dear life, because religion for me is a lifeline. But society's views and social constructs are not.
Yep, absolutely, Sheetal. That really connects with me when you say that it's not the religion, but it's the organized religion which is meant to control. And that's quite spot on, I must say. Yes, Ezra, I've been seeing you've been quite keen. Please add on.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Just as you were talking, Sheetal, you sort of inspired me. I thinking about not my own experience. I don't want to speak on behalf of someone here, but I kind of want to throw in a yes and for the panel around this. Experience of someone I'm very close to in my life, where the challenge that comes from family, I think, in close relationships, utilizing faith here, and I'm going to trigger warning here for homophobia and transphobia. And all of those awful things, but that sort of this question with the lens of what does it mean for us when our family and our loved ones, I guess, try to weaponize religion or try to weaponize the tenets of faith against our identities. I know that can be really, really challenging, and I've had people in my personal life really, really struggle with that. I'm going to be cheeky and essentially ask my own question off the back of this, and I'd love to hear from the panel of what would you say to someone experiencing that, I guess?
Yep, absolutely, Ezra. But I think that this entire discussion and this both of responses from you as well as Sheetal and the previous question also summarizes one of the other question that we received from our from the attendees, which says that how can we change the religiophobia in the LGBTIQ community? I hope this discussion thus addresses this question of yours. Since we are also running out of time, we've been receiving a lot of questions. I'll just try and cover a couple of quick ones, and maybe then for the rest of the questions, we'll get back to all of you and try and respond to you post the event. We've got one question for Percy, which says, how can other Christians help the wider church to stop mistreating the LGBT community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd say this also applies to any religion as well, is that like LGBT people need allies everywhere, and that means speaking up and speaking up and standing up for people in situations where if you hear like a sermon about that's promoting conversion practices or promoting like homophobia, then speak up about it, talk to other people about it, and like don't let it just go unchecked, because that's how things just keep going, like the status quo keeps going because it's not questioned. And I think people, like having a lot of queer people in religion but also allies to support them, means that these kind of homophobic and transphobic ideas can be changed and questioned.
If I may, I think that extends beyond Christianity and speaks to just allies generally. So if you, there's that common saying that if you, whatever you, the attitudes you walk past or you allow, something along those lines. Now I can't forget what the saying is, but it's a lot easier for the ally to step in and check in on those conversations than the person who's affected, because it can be quite paralyzing for the person. And off that point, I do want to address what Ezra had raised about using faith as a weapon against us and our queer identities. I really love this concept of calling someone in rather than calling someone out, especially in circumstances where we have so much cancel culture around us. I would take that as an opportunity, because if they're using religion, they're probably relatively close, because people usually tread relatively lightly when it comes to talking about religion. So if they're comfortable enough talking to you about religion, you're probably comfortable enough to call them in and say, well, what is it about that's making you think that way? And trigger warning for homophobia. Like, what is it about Hinduism that you think that, you know, I'm going to be reincarnated as a dog in the next life, assuming that a dog reincarnation is a bad thing, because dogs have such a great life when they're treated as pets. So what is it about that? Why do you think that way? And really try to understand and unpack where that is coming from. If it's coming from a place of ignorance, then there's an opportunity to educate. And this is huge in the CALD space, because there's no word for lesbian in Hinduism. There's no language in Hindi there's no word in Hindi for lesbian. So trying to communicate a concept to people who speak a language when that language doesn't have a word for it is quite difficult. So my parents didn't understand the concept because it was a foreign concept and there was no word for it. So they were ignorant by virtue of not being exposed to anything like that before, until along came I saying, I don't think I'm straight. And then going into the scriptures and saying, but mom, look, Vishnu is Mohini. So why do we pray to one and then admonish another one? That makes no sense, because he and I soham, like we are the one and the same. So it's really about questioning the basis of those kinds of comments or weaponizing religion. And in all honesty, anytime religion is weaponized, again, that for me just screams organized religion and control. And when you have someone that is exercising that kind of controlling behavior, you really, depending on how much capacity you have, because again, it's emotional labor, how much capacity you have to call that person in to have a conversation, or whether that's one you say, you know what, I'm not ready, I'm not in the headspace to have that conversation. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've spent probably a year and a half not having those conversations. And it's only recently that I feel comfortable saying to people, extended family members, what that's all about.
Yeah, surely. Let me just wrap this up. We'll just jump on the last question that we got. And the question is, all right, we've got this question for Bhante, which says, how does your sexual identity and your monasticism relate to each other, and how was your journey How has your journey been in relating to a monastic community?
So a big question with a long answer, which I'll try to shorten and say that it wasn't always easy. And one of the reasons is because of people's ignorance around what sexuality actually is. So there's this idea that once you become a monk, then your sexuality should be irrelevant. And some people would say, but you're no longer gay because you're either celibate or because you've become a monk. And it's like, I don't think you know how this works. So there's a lot of ignorance that I had to work with in other people who didn't understand that they too had a gender. You know, they also had a sexuality, which they perceived as normal. And so I really felt very othered in a lot of my, the earlier part of my monastic life, where I didn't feel confident enough to own who I was and be proud of who I was. Alert to the way our position as queer people, as people of faith, can be compromised by our leaders. And at the moment, some of you will be aware that there's a bill in the federal parliament, which is ostensibly about religious discrimination and religious freedom, but actually could become an opportunity for religion to further discriminate against LGBTQI+ people. So we need to be alert to these things that are happening around us. And not only do we need allies, but we need to advocate for ourselves and advocate strongly for ourselves in the corridors of power where we're able to, where we're safe to. And so I would like to mention that I've just drafted a letter that's come out through Equality Australia, which I would encourage you to sign. If you need to contact me about it, please do. And it's just a letter just reminding the federal government that there are queer people of faith and that we're the ones who know how it feels to have both these things in our lives, and they're inseparable, and the government shouldn't seek to ask us to choose between these two parts of ourselves. So I can share that information with the panelists, and I'd love it if you could pass that on to the guests on this call as well.
Absolutely, Bhante. We will surely be having the details of all the attendees, and we would love to have those information. It would surely be very helpful. And saying that you have also responded and very much elaborated on my very last request, which was asking about the last piece of advice for the next generation or the people who are struggling. So we would just like to, since we're running out of time, we do have like 3-4 more questions, but since we're running out of time, sorry to all those attendees, all the questions, those that we have missed out, we'll sure and we'll endear our best to get back to you after the event. But we'll just wrap this up with after requesting the final piece of advice from the rest of our panelists.
Okay, so shall I go first?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that if there are any queer Muslims in the audience, I think that what I'm present to at the moment is the similarities between our journeys back to faith. And at some point, we all have left organized religion, and it seems within that space we actually found God, and we found, you know, our connection with ourselves. And so I think that's an important thing. And if there are queer Muslims out there who feel that, you know, that is something that they're not allowed to do, I think it's absolutely necessary, because we don't necessarily have a problem with God or with the values of our faiths, but more with the organized faith that's often steered by patriarchy. And speaking of the values, I think when we start to reconnect with faith, for me as a Muslim, it has been the values of compassion, that God is compassion, and we should be embodying that compassion as vicegerents of God. The concept of justice within Islam, I mean, this is a great value and concept within the Quran, and it always starts with personal justice. And if we don't accept ourselves for who we are, then we need to question whether we are just with ourselves. The meaning of Islam, I mean, it comes from Arabic, and Arabic is such a rich language. And so there are different meanings to the word Islam. And the first one is peace. And peace has to be permeating in all aspects of our lives as Muslims. So it's peace in body, mind, and soul. So if we're still struggling with reconciling, with our innate identity, then we need to ask ourselves, am I Muslim? Am I really Muslim? And I'm still on that journey. Surrendering is another meaning of Islam. It's surrendering to what is, so if you recognize that this is an innate identity, then just surrender to that, and then safety, personal safety for others, and that's why I guess that one of the greatest services that I prize is serving others, and through serving others, helping them to reconcile with the faith. I have gained so much through that. So I hope that would help some queer Muslims out there.
Surely. Absolutely, Mohsin. Thanks for sharing those words of wisdom. Percy, would you like to add on to the final piece of advice?
Yeah, I just have some really brief advice, and that is that you don't have to choose between being queer or being religious. Like for myself, I feel like I'm queer because I'm religious, and I'm religious because I'm queer. And those two things just make so much sense to me as being like both an equal part of my identity. And I'd say that's true for anyone, that they are really easily compatible. It can feel hard, but it actually does make a lot of sense. So yeah.
Oh, Vandan, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Percy. Let me, without being more verbose, or just like, since we're just running out of time and we just don't want the rest of our attendees to miss out on the dinner time, what would be your final piece of advice, Sheetal and Ezra? Either of you can go first.
I think for me, it's the recognition that we are so much more than our sexuality. We're so much more than our religious identity. We're complex individuals with intersecting identities, and different facets of our identities are centered at different times in our life, and we get to decide that. So above and beyond all of these socially constructed identities that society, families, organized religions impose on us, at the end of the day, you have to live in a way that's authentic to you and your higher power. And at the end of the day, that's a discussion you have with you and your higher power, and no one else interferes between that. So whatever brings comfort and peace to you, I think that's your calling, and that's your Shakti, and that's your connection to your higher being.
I'm going to take a slightly different tack, I think, in terms of the advice I'd like to share. I'm aware that I'm probably not necessarily speaking to a majority of attendees when I talk to allies of queer people of faith. I know pretty much all I imagine in this space queer people, but for those of us who inhabit queer spaces and are allies to queer people of faith, I would really encourage you to reflect on, what's necessary to make queer spaces inclusive of faith identities and faith practices. It might be as simple as considering the dietary requirements of different cultures and different faiths. So for instance, please make sure there's no pork or seafood options available for myself. Make sure there are non-alcoholic options available for people whose faith requires that they don't consume alcohol. Familiarize yourselves with just the basics of different faith practices and what they need from spaces to feel accommodated and feel welcome. It can be really, really simple and really, really straightforward. It's just a matter of making sure there are multiple options available, and that spaces have what they need, the basics of what they need to be able to navigate their identity in those spaces. We often come equipped with basically everything we need most of the time anyway. I've lost track of the number of times I just make sure I've got, not quite kosher snacks, but at least something that doesn't have pork or seafood in it that I can bring to an event just to be safe. Although I live in Melbourne, so the chances are there's going to be lots and lots of vegan food there anyway, which is great. And then also just consider the language and the tone and the way that you engage in those spaces, and the dialogue that you engage in. Making sure that obviously it's mindful of people's various practices and beliefs, because it can sometimes be really difficult to express the faith side of your identity in queer spaces without getting looked at funny or having people sort of not quite sure how to deal with you, because as much as we talk about queerphobia and transphobia in religious spaces, there is oftentimes an aversion to religion in queer spaces. And it's about addressing that and allowing people to come as they are, with whatever practices they may have, with whatever presentation they may have, with whatever beliefs they may hold dear to and practices that they hold dear to. Yeah.
Yep, that's a very different take, and I would say that's very rather holistic and very sensible approach as well, Ezra. Thanks for sharing that and that very different input. I'm sure it would really help. And just on that note, we would wrap up our session, and we'll try and get back to you on the rest of the questions. It's really amazing to see how curious people are and the level of engagement with the number of questions we are aiming with. Thanks very much. And for all our attendees, if you'd like to get involved, please feel free to reach out and check our website, which is outforaustralia.org. Thanks everyone for your time. And let me not take much of it. And I hope you and all of your near ones and close ones stay well and safe in these tough times. And really appreciate your time and have a lovely night. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care of yourselves, and great to meet you. I hope we get to work together in the future sometime. I really learned a lot.
Seconded. This was fantastic. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
As I mentioned in the chat, we'll make sure that we get the questions shared around. If anyone wants to do any written blog posts, any questions that we didn't get to, it would be amazing. We would love that. We've just launched a blog, and I'm always looking for more content, and I would love to get stuff from this event up there because there's just so much that you've all got to share.
Yeah, and thank you. I got cut off, but I was saying I learned a lot from each of you.
Sorry.